I have just about over 150,000 miles on my 2013 GX460. The maintenance records don't show the Serpentine Belt being changed, so I'm going to do that today along with the idler pulley and belt tensioner. These are the part numbers here. Got the pulley, tensioner, and V-belt. All OEM parts from Bell, Lexus, Scottsdale. Alright, first step, you gotta remove the radiator cover. Use one of these trim tools to remove these plastic pieces. The engine cover as well to give yourself some more room. So coming from the front of the car, that's your fan. And this is the fan shroud. First thing you gotta do is jam a long flathead screwdriver in there to hold it still while you use a wrench to take off the nuts. Setup I have here is I have a pry bar stuck in here to prevent it from moving, and I got a 12mm wrench on the nut, and I can loosen all 4 of these using this method. It's not easy to see. So now the fan is loose, I can take it off, but first we're going to take off the shroud. Just leave this here for now. Okay, so there are 3 10mm bolts you have to take off for the shroud. First one is right here. Second one is connected to the overflow tank. And then the last one is on the driver's side, underneath this radiator hose. See that right there? 10mm bolt. Now that you have those 3 bolts removed, you're gonna have to remove this hose that connects from the overflow tank to the radiator. So you should be able to just wrestle it off with your hands or with a pair of pliers. I'm gonna use a pick here to loosen up this hose. A little bit of spillage. You gotta be careful with the shroud. Just make sure it doesn't get snagged up on anything. Once you remove it, you got all this space to work with your serpentine belt and tensioner and pulleys. So on your hood above, you have a routing diagram for your belt. Over here is your belt tensioner, And over here is your idler pulley. So now I have a 14mm socket on a 1/2-inch drive long ratchet, and when you turn counterclockwise you can loosen the belt. And at the bottom there, you can't really see it here, but there's a slot where you can stick a hex key in there, an Allen wrench, to hold the tensioner in place. What I realized is you actually don't need to lock the tensioner in place. You can just hold it in place with your breaker bar and then take off the belt. Now we're going to take off the tensioner and the idler pulley, replace those, then put on the new belt. Actually, it doesn't look too bad for 150,000 miles. It's the old one. It's the new one. The old belt tensioner versus the new. From what I was able to see on forums, the torque specs for this bolt is 17 foot-pounds, so I'm just gonna go ahead and do that. I'm gonna go ahead and try to thread in the hex bolt, the internal hex bolt first. Alright, I got both bolts hand tightened. It's a little tricky to align it, but you can go from the left side while you're installing it to get a better view of the bolt holes there. Now we're going to torque them down. Got my torque wrench set to about 20 foot-pounds. Pretty sure I got a timing cover leak here. Right now, not losing any oil that's noticeable, but we'll have to reseal it at some point. That's pretty tight. The old one does have a little bit of noise when spinning it. The bearing may be starting to go bad. The torque for this bolt is 32 foot-pounds. Now we're going to route this belt through, following the diagram on the hood. You're going to want to do everything except for the belt tensioner. Do that last once you have everything else in place. Now that we have the belt loosely around every pulley besides the belt tensioner, we're going to crank upwards counterclockwise on that bolt and then slide the belt on. For this part, you will need to lock the belt tensioner in place with the 5. Alright, do not start the engine like I just did, otherwise this part will come flying off. There are 2 points where the shroud can get stuck at the bottom. You can kind of bend the plastic shroud to get around those 2 points, but just be careful when doing so. Now it's just the reverse. Thread the nuts back on first by hand, and then we'll tighten them down. If you can fit one of these ratcheting box-in wrenches in, it's very helpful. Another note is be careful when you use a pry bar in the earlier step, taking these off, because I damaged these threads a little bit. The torque specs for these fan bolts are 15 foot-pounds. And you can use a contraption like this to torque them down, or you can just do it by feel. Don't forget to reconnect this hose.